Ladies and gentlemen, introducing Riley Lee, who has performed worldwide, Sydney Opera House, Boston Symphony Hall, Paris, London, all over the world. Began playing shakuhachi in 1971 with three of the most respected teachers from Japan. In 1980, he became the first non-Japanese to attain Dai Shihan, Grand Master in shakuhachi. Also the first non-Japanese professional taiko player, a founding member of Sado no Kuni Ondeskoza. He's also an honorary fellow of Western Sydney University. Has a PhD in ethnomusicology from Sydney University, regular visiting fellow and guest lecturer at Princeton, and recently created and taught a semester-long course there on the brain, knowledge, memory, meditation, mindfulness, and music. Please welcome Riley Lee.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. The last live performance I did was about 2.5 weeks ago in the Kildare Cathedral, right in the middle of Ireland. And I'm a little bit closer to home here, but I can tell you it's just as much of a pleasure to be here as it was there, and certainly a lot warmer, even though it's summer there and winter here. Some of you probably have never seen or heard of the shakuhachi, and I'll be explaining a little bit about the instrument as I go along. I'm also going to have you do some breathing with me as well while I play, and I'll explain that too as I go along. Obviously it's a bamboo flute, so one has to learn how to breathe in order to play this well. But first, I'd like to just play you something so that you understand or can just hear what it sounds like. So that is an example of the repertoire that is perhaps the most fundamental for the shakuhachi. In fact, they're called honkyoku. Hon means original, kyoku means piece. The original pieces, the main pieces for the shakuhachi. And they were created, performed, transmitted, largely within the context of Zen Buddhism. So they function first and foremost as a meditation. And what is that? A way to develop one's ability to concentrate and to become aware. And so with this type of music, one becomes aware not only of one's breathing, of one's thoughts, but one uses sound to become aware of the here and now. So I think it's very appropriate that this series is called Sound and Art, or Art and Sound. Anyway, art, sound. Sound is fundamental. Sound is quite something. In many spiritual practices, the sounds came before anything else. So in the Hindu and therefore the Buddhist lineage of spiritual practice, there's a sound called ah. Ah. And ah is supposed to be the beginning of creation. Ah. And there is a piece called ajikan, which means contemplating the sound ah. I won't play the whole piece for you, but it's this. And so forth. In the Christian lineage of spirituality, of course, it's in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, which means the Word was the infinite, the Word, sound. And you don't even have to go to spiritual practices. When we talk about now in modern physics the kind of layman's term for the beginning of the universe that we know, and there may be others, apparently, what do we say? What's the word? It's the Big Bang. Right? It's sound. That's quite amazing, quite something. So I'd like you to use your ears and pay attention to the sound that one can generate with just a piece of bamboo, with only 4 holes in the front, 1 hole in the back, and that's all it is. These are the roots. So it's pretty much just a piece of bamboo. They come in different lengths, and I'd like to play for you a larger of these honkyoku, these meditative pieces, on this longer instrument. It's called sanya, which means mountain valley. So picture, those of you that have been in Japan will particularly in the winter, will know what I'm talking about. In the western part, the western side of the main mountain range that goes down the center of the main island is a place called the Snow Country. And all the wind that comes from Siberia. The air comes from Siberia. It goes over what the Japanese call the Japan Sea. The Koreans don't call it that. They call it the Eastern Sea. It picks up all that moisture, and then it hits these mountains, and so it dumps all the moisture as snow. And this area has one of the highest snowfalls in the world. It's not as cold as further up north in Hokkaido, for example. It's just the right temperature for snow. So it can snow up to 3 meters in a year. That's not drifts, that's just the snow. And you go there and you see houses, 2-story houses, and there's a door on the first floor, the ground floor. And there's the second floor from the ground. There's a door that leads to nowhere. And at first you think, what? It's because during the winter, that's how they have to get in and out of the houses, because the rest of it's all blocked up with snow. Imagine morning after a heavy snowfall. And those of you that have experienced a heavy snowfall in the morning know that snow absorbs sound. So the first thing, you go out in the morning and there's all this snow in this valley surrounded by mountains, and it is so quiet. It's quieter than if you just walk into a quiet room. It's a different sort of silence. It's the silence of an entire valley covered in snow. That's what this piece is about. That's how it starts. However, it's winter. Air is very cold. No wind. Cold air can transmit sound better than warm air, apparently. So when sound does happen, when, for example, a branch covered in snow finally falls from the weight of the snow and cracks, that sound is so loud. So this is called Mountain Valley. It's about 8 minutes long, and I suggest you imagine being in this snowed-in valley, in the snow country in Japan. But let the sound take you elsewhere if your mind wants to do that. I think one of the better ways to listen to this sort of music, because you don't know this sort of music. There's nothing you can hang on to. You can't anticipate what's going to happen next and get the pleasure of anticipating correctly. This is why we like songs that we know. You don't have that ability, so let your mind go where it wants to. Listen passively. But now and again, come back to me. Come back to here. So this piece, Mountain Valley, Sanya, is about 8 minutes long. Okay? You go your way, I will go mine, and I'll see you in 8 minutes' time. I appreciate the hesitation there, and I forgot to tell you, you don't need to applaud with these pieces because they're not all that conducive to applause, are they? It's like, yeah. So no need to applaud. Maybe at the very end, perhaps, if you feel like it, but no need to applaud in between these pieces. So I mentioned that just before returning from being overseas for about 3 months, I was in Ireland, and I played at the Chester Beatty Museum or Library in Trinity College. I performed at St. Anne's Church right in the middle of Dublin, this beautiful, beautiful, huge church. And I played at Kildare Cathedral, which is right in the middle of Ireland. But for me, the most pleasurable performance or experience in Ireland was some friends that I was with took me to an Irish pub. And they said, okay, we're going to take you to this Irish pub it's not where all the tourists goes. It's kind of out of the way. But they always have music there, so they play music. And it's more kind of old school. And you get a lot of these pubs in the country, but it's hard to find them in Dublin. So we went there, and they have a section, it's packed, but they have a section just for musicians. And there's signs everywhere. Don't sit here unless you're a musician. Do not sit here unless you're a musician. And even though the rest of the place is packed, there are these empty chairs. So the two friends that I was with were both musicians. And so they said, okay, we can sit here. And one of them actually knew some of the fiddle players. So yeah, please. Oh my goodness, here I am. And so they're playing along, and it's wonderful. It's just great. And they're just, if you've never heard Irish music performed as it's played in these pubs, you're in for a treat. And those of you that have know what I'm talking about. So anyway, we're sitting there, and my musician friends are both joining in on the songs they know, and they don't know all of them, obviously. And then they take a break, and then I think that the kind of the head, there's no real leader, but the older fiddle player who seems to know every song. So she looks at me, And she says, because when we sat down, my friends introduced them, the other musicians introduced me to them. She says, well, so what instrument do you play? What's it sound like? Like, come on. Oh, no. And it's this noisy pub, right? So I thought, okay, right. Anyway, I started to play, and immediately the noise in the pub, all the chatter and the talk in the pub started to die down. Not because of how, my music, but because it's different. And they think, oh, well, what's that? They've never heard that before. So that's cool. But what was really neat is that the whole pub became quiet for the whole song. I mean, how neat is that? So I'm going to play. That's just a big, long kind of bragging sort of way to introduce this next piece, which is that piece that I was able to quiet an entire Irish pub, Guinness pints and all. And this piece, it's also part of the Honkyoku repertoire. So technically it's a meditation, but it originated, and this is why I chose it, because it's kind of fast, particularly for these sort of pieces. It originated as a lion dance. So, the Chinese and the Japanese have these lion dances. They're celebratory dances. You see them a lot in New Year's, but, they can happen anytime. So it's called the Lion Dance of Azuma, Azuma Jishi. So I can relive that wonderful moment in Dublin. The shakuhachi originally came from Japan, and this instrument was made in Japan. I guess many of them aren't these days. There are makers. There's a maker here in Australia, and there are makers in Europe and the United States. It's becoming more and more of an international instrument. So I would imagine soon, perhaps not in my lifetime, but the next generation will think of this instrument as we think of the piano. We don't think of the piano as, coming from any one particular country or culture. It's universal, like the guitar, for example. And to demonstrate this, I'll play for you. I did play in Ireland. I played 2 concerts with an Irish harpist, and in fact, on Saturday, this coming day after tomorrow, I'll be at the Sydney Folk Festival, and I'll be playing with an Irish harpist that lives here in Sydney. And one of the songs that we'll be playing is this Irish tune called "She Moves Through the Fair." I think it sounds much better with the harp, but I'll give it a go as a solo. And as you can hear there's nothing Japanese about it, really. There are many verses, of course, because it tells a story, but that gives you an idea. With that, I'm going to segue into some other music that is, in a sense, it's neither Western music or European music or Japanese music, certainly from this age, because I'm going to play for you, I'd like to play for you a couple of pieces, or at least one piece, that was composed in the 1100s. What's that, 1100? 2020. Quite a long time ago, many thousands of years ago. It was composed by a lady called Hildegard of Bingen. And what I'd like to play for you is a piece called Caritas Abundat, which means abundant charity. So I mentioned that I would like to have you do some breathing with me. And what I'm going to do, and perhaps if we could have a little bit of light in the house, I'm going to play the very first piece that I played for you again. It's about 3 minutes. Now what I want you to do is to breathe with me. So when I inhale, I want you to inhale. When I play, I want you to pretend to play. I want you to blow out through your mouth like you're playing a flute. Right? Don't inhale again until I inhale again. Notice that I don't immediately breathe very often. In other words, I don't inhale immediately after I stop playing. There are these pauses in between the phrases. There's this thing, if we had more time, I could talk to you about space. The space that the notes inhabit, the space that the sound inhabits, but the space where the silence inhabits too. And silence and sound are really the same thing. Just like heads and tails are really the same thing. Okay, light and dark is really the same thing. Okay, so no time for that, but I do want you to at least experience how I play this. Now, you don't know the song. I mean, you heard it once, but that's not enough. So you're going to inhale maybe more than you need to. You're going to have too much air, or you won't have enough. But just try to follow, okay? Try to inhale and inhale. Try to exhale as I play the instrument. And don't breathe in until I breathe in again. And you can relax while you're not breathing in, a bit like after a sigh. You don't go, That's not how we sigh. Okay, everyone, let's do a sigh together to get warmed up. Here we go. Ready? Okay, now do the same thing and inhale immediately afterwards. Okay, ready? Now that's not a sigh. It doesn't work that way, right? Pay attention. Pay attention. Be aware. Okay? That's what this is all about. We're born and we don't have any awareness, you know. We're babies and we can hardly see a foot in front of us. And gradually our awareness expands and suddenly we can recognize our mother, you know, and that's about it. And then gradually we can recognize a little bit more and a little bit more. And here we are in university and we're aware of a hell of a lot more than we were when we were a baby, but we still aren't very aware of very much. We want to keep being more and more aware, more and more aware. And pay attention to what we want to be aware of. We can't be aware of everything, of course. Pay attention. And we just do that for the rest of our lives, and then we die. That's life, but it's great. So be aware of how I play. Okay, here we go. Ready? You ready? Sometimes I'm breathing through my nose. Sometimes I'm breathing through my mouth. Okay, so do that too. I'm always breathing through my nose, even when I breathe through my mouth. Did you notice that you were listening to me? You were hearing things to a far greater degree, far more than when you were just listening the first time I played it. Because you were watching me more. You were using your eyes. You were listening with your eyes. You were seeing with your ears. Okay? That's all the time we have, and unless you have a question or two, I'm happy to answer any questions. But other than that, I really appreciate the opportunity to share, my passion with you, and I hope that you, if not become as passionate as I have and devote your entire life to it, at least you now recognize the instrument and you know about it. And you'll say, oh yeah, I've heard that instrument. It's called the shakuhachi. Shakuhachi. Okay, so remember that. Any questions? Yes?
What's your experience with playing?
Believe it or not, I'm going deaf. And actually it makes my instrument sound better to me. But please speak louder.
What's your experience with playing with other Japanese instruments?
I still didn't hear that. Hang on.
What's your experience with playing with other Japanese instruments?
What's my experience? I can answer that several ways. My experience is vast. Of course, that's the first thing I performed, the first other instruments I played with. So for the first perhaps 10 years of my 50 years with the instrument, I played almost entirely with Japanese musical instruments such as the koto, the shamisen. I've played with the biwa as well, and of course with the singing that accompanies that. So that's my experience. And then my experience is that it's wonderful. So of course, they were kind of created in the same culture, weren't they? They share a similar place. However, having left Japan after about 8 or 9 years of there, and attempting to make a living as a freelance musician, I had to learn and wanted to play with musicians other than Japanese musicians, or other than musicians who play Japanese instruments. I still do play with Japanese instruments. There's a brilliant koto player. We have in Australia one of the top koto players in the world, Satsuki Oramura. And I had the pleasure of playing with her in April, I think, in the Blue Mountains, in the Blue Mountains Music Festival or something, up in Blackheath. So lots of experience and wonderful experiences. Any other questions?
I just want to know about your experience playing with instruments, that aren't Japanese, and say, like using improvisational skills, playing with, I don't know, do things with guitars and pianos, and what sort of experience, what sort of things do you do?
What other instruments have I
What
played
other
with?
instruments and genres and improvisation as well?
Right.
And how does that work? Yeah.
Okay. I've performed with just about every musical instrument there is, I played perhaps one of the more. I played with Joseph Tadadros, the oud, at University of Western Sydney when Matthew Hinson was here. I played frequently with classical harp, not just the Irish harp. I have 3 albums, one of which won the equivalent of the Grammy Award in Hawaiian music, called the Nahoku Award, with a slack key guitarist, Jeff Peterson in Hawaii. Having grown up in Hawaii, that music is very dear to me. I've played with rock bands, with jazz musicians. There are other shakuhachi players that play jazz brilliantly, far better than I could play. I improvise a lot. Most of the music that you find of mine on, for example, Spotify, is improvised music. So I do like to improvise. The majority of my compositions, I think I have about 400 songs, but these are all variations and so forth. 400 pieces of music registered with APRA, AMCOS. And the majority of those, they're compositions, but I composed them by improvising, I guess you would say. Didgeridoo, one of my early recordings with Matthew Doyle. I've performed with Barton. What's his first name? Yes, okay. Brilliant man. Very, very intelligent person. And so I don't know, what are the piano? Yes, played with piano. Cello, I've got a CD with cello. Violins. I have a recording with string quartet. 10 pieces composed all by Australian composers with this quartet that's not very well known. They only come together occasionally, called the Enigma String Quartet. So that was brilliant too. They really got my pitch much better than it was before. Very, very much so. And it's been brilliant. The strengths of playing with, for example, a string quartet are different. The things I need to pay attention to is much different from what, for example, I need to pay attention to with Japanese music. The music sensibilities are different. It's still music. It's definitely sound. And it's about paying attention. I just have to pay attention to different things. With Japanese music, pitch, it's good, but it doesn't have to be, down to 444 as opposed to 442 hertz per second, for example. A little bit more leeway there. On the other hand, with traditional Japanese music, tone color, timbre is very important. So the difference between and huge, very important. That's not so important with European art music instruments. By and large, you want the one tone. If in a symphony orchestra, if a composer wants a different tone color, they'll just get another instrument to play that tone color, right? You want the clarinet sound? Okay, you get a clarinet to play it, and so forth. In Japanese music, it's not like that, and other non-Western musics. So it's been brilliant for me. I think my instrument and my position as my instrument is a bit like what I discovered in Europe. Everyone speaks English. Everybody nowadays, particularly, of your age. And I don't get a chance to speak another language. I know a bit of German, but, they don't want to listen to my lousy German when they can just speak English, right? On the other hand, you get these people. One of our daughters lives in Switzerland, and there's Schweizerdeutsch, but there's also Romansh. There's this language that's neither Italian nor German nor French, and if you grow up there, that's your mother tongue, and you have to learn other languages. You just have to, all right? Our grandchildren in Germany, in Switzerland, sorry, not Germany, they learn Swiss German, which is not German. They're now learning German, in primary school. They learn English just because it's there, and then the French is along the way. French is probably when they're age 10. I'm like that musically. I get to learn, maybe not, I can't speak it as a mother tongue. I can't play it quite as well as I can the European, the Honkyoku, but I get to learn all this other music from all these other cultures. And I know you guys have got other classes to go to, so I should stop talking. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. See ya.
And thanks to Mitchell and Noel as well, please. Mitchell for putting it in the PA so nicely.
Yes, thank you, Mitchell. Thank you, Noel. Thank you. Thank you very much.